Sure. Just to give you a little bit of an update, this forum this week, hosted by the UNDP Business and Human Rights team alongside UNICEF, UN Women, um, and a number of other UN agencies, we've had over 6,500 fully registered participants. Every single session of the 38 sessions this week with over 200 speakers. Each one had approximately anywhere between 150 to 700 participants. We're seeing on average that for any given event, we're probably going to be closer to about 100 to 250. That's what you can expect today. Participants have mostly been from the Asia Pacific region, but we've had panelists and speakers and participants from across the planet, at least viewing and participating at various levels throughout this week. Today we are, I do want to stop because we are on time, so I'm going to go ahead and let Ricardo give us the 3, 2, 1 countdown to live.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So as of now, we are broadcasting on YouTube. I'm about to start the broadcast on Zoom as well, so we are all aware of that. And the recording is also about to start in 3, 2, 1. We are recording as of now, so thank you all for being here on this event. I'm very happy to be one of the co-organizers tonight. Our event is My SDG Action 2030 campaign, transformational actions by the Malaysian private sector in achieving the SDGs collectively. So that's quite a title, but the challenge is no less important. So thank you all very much for being here. So as a part of the Inside Pack team, I'm here to help in case anything should arise. I'm more than happy to attend any questions within the chat to help you all as panelists. We do have one Q&A feature and a Q&A section, so all of the attendees can pose their questions using that particular tool. Our moderator, Mr. Nadar, will be attending to those when the time is due. So thank you all once again, and I wish you a very good panel. Farouz, the floor is yours. I'll be timing in case that's needed, and just as I said, more than happy to help if anything arises. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ricardo. Assalamualaikum and good morning to all viewers. I'm Farouz Nadar, the Executive Director of Global Compact Network Malaysia, your host for this morning's side session. Happy to share that we have well over 1,000 registrations for this session. Thank you all for joining us today on what I can promise will be an exciting and thought-provoking session with our lineup of government, UN and business leaders. My heartfelt thanks to UN ESCAP for according us the opportunity to organize this side session and being able to showcase Malaysian private sector sustainability leaders, especially in the post-COVID world. Today is a big day for us at Global Compact Malaysia as well, as we will be sharing more on our flagship My SDG Action 2030 campaign. As we say in Malaysia, terima kasih semua. Together, we will discover expert insights and good practices of how Malaysian private sector actors are taking a leadership role in ensuring a sustainable future and leveraging the new normal to embed sustainability practices by design. In short, we will delve to both the skill and will of the private sector to be SDG champions and to realize the decade of action. To start off, we are privileged to welcome two top sustainability thinkers and doers in Malaysia for our fireside chat. Yang Berhormat Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, the Minister of Communications and Multimedia, who has championed sustainable development from his various roles in his distinguished career, and Mr. Stephen Prisner, the UN Resident Coordinator for Malaysia, Singapore and Brunei, who is a key figure advocating a whole-of-nation approach in achieving the SDGs. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this morning. To get the ball rolling, I would like to invite Mr. Stephen to share his thoughts with his welcome message. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Farouz, and a very good morning to all of you. I hope you're all safe and well in these extraordinary times. YB Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, it's so nice to be with you on a panel. We have been for a long time, I think, collaborating so well on the SDGs, and it's so good to see you. Also happy to be here together with a distinguished panel of corporate sustainability leaders. Nice to meet you all online, and a very warm welcome from the UN in Malaysia. I start with an upfront message, and that message is the same pre and post-COVID, namely that the SDGs will not be achieved unless there is a paradigm change in the way we do business. And of course, apart from governments who are primarily responsible for the SDG achievement, it is the private sector who will make or break the attainment and the success of the Sustainable Development Goals. Having said that, I want to express my hope that all of you and your companies were by and large spared so far from the COVID triple crisis, from the health crisis, the economic crisis, the social crisis, and that your businesses were resilient so that no major disruption or downscaling was necessary, that you may have benefited from the stimulus packages, and that you go with new resolve into the new era that we so often call the new normal. We at the UN are often asked whether COVID-19 presents a serious challenge to the achievement of the SDGs. Well, unfortunately, one has to say the SDGs were already not on track before COVID. There was a little bit of a time lag from the year 2015 when they were approved to when they got traction. Many of the goals were slow, and there were even some reverse movement with regard to some goals, such as SDG 10, inequality, SDG 13, climate change, or SDG 14 and 15, biodiversity. This is why at the beginning of this year, still, I think not knowing how strong the COVID crisis would hit, the UN Secretary General has launched a decade of action to call on everybody to accelerate the energy on SDG achievement with a decade of action from 2020 to 2030, only 10 years left to achieve the SDGs. But then came COVID with its devastating humanitarian, health, and socioeconomic impacts globally. As you all know, the countries embarked almost synchronously on social distancing measures, and many supply chains and trade links have come to a near halt. The newest forecast of the World Bank, it's a few days old, envisions a 5.2% contraction in global GDP in 2020, and that is the deepest global recession in 8 decades. So we are suddenly having a world with elevated domestic debts, plunging investor confidence, and on the other side also higher inequality, more unemployment, and higher vulnerability of already vulnerable groups, such as those working in the informal sector and the poor. And in addition, after the dip of the last 3 months, we know that one of the relatively at least positive kind of impacts was the momentary dip of carbon emissions. But as we see, carbon emissions go very quickly back to normal as economies restart. And as of yesterday, we are only minus 5% from last year. So if the trajectory kind of continues, then we will also soon have equal or more carbon emissions, as we had before the crisis. So the answer is yes, COVID impact presents a huge challenge on SDG achievement. But I want to kind of give a positive spin to that. I think if there's one positive aspect, it is that crises usually also spur the ingenuity of countries, of businesses, of people to innovate and to start something profoundly new. And there is ample evidence of that in history. So this time, when the skies suddenly turned blue, and I have seen this myself in KL, which was an amazing experience. The colors were never as colorful before in my garden. And I think that many people realized what it means to really kind of breathe clean air. And this, I believe, for many demonstrated more powerfully than ever before, the link between, the economic development and the environment. So this can be a negative link, but I think the big challenge now is to twist it into a positive link, or a neutral link at least. And I believe that this experience that was really kind of equal for everybody will almost certainly further strengthen the demand side, the consumer side, to demand sustainable production patterns. So the new normal cannot mean minor adjustment. and otherwise going back to the old patterns. We believe that there's an opportunity to boldly shape the new normal. We don't have to accept the new normal. The new normal is what we will design. And we can embark on a new paradigm shift, and we have to embark on a new paradigm shift. It's a chance to embark on a better, more inclusive, more sustainable world. And it is obvious that this cannot be done without the business sector. Private sector, we know, is the key to revitalize the economy, to job protection, to job creation, to innovation, to investment. And so this is an opportunity for everyone to recalibrate towards the Sustainable Development Goals and set foundations for the longer terms. And for businesses, I think this means things like gender balanced workforce, decent work conditions, rejecting corruption, adopting environmentally friendly production patterns, decarbonize production, and perhaps also advocating with their environment, with their consumers and their production chains to do the same. So a huge opportunity. We need to build SDGs systematically into business operations, into strategies, into investment decisions. Supply chains need to be evaluated according to compliance with SDGs. And of course, governments' fiscal incentive systems and investment packages have a huge role to create the catalytic effect. It will not be catalytic unless the government pushes and pulls with carrot and stick a little bit and incentivizes the private sector to go into a green and into an inclusive transition. And we, of course, from the United Nations family, and I'm proud to represent the 19 UN agencies that support Malaysia, stand ready to support all of this. And I believe that market forces will support this. We see already that in many parts of the world, there is a rapid embarkment on the green transition. It was even the case before COVID-19, but I think it's happening even more vigorously now, as COVID kind of slowly eases up. 30 seconds. As such, my last sentence is that it is not only the right way to go for business, but I think it's also the economically sound way to go. I thank you all that are participating for your fantastic leadership, and I wish you a good conversation and a good kind of restart into the post-COVID period. Nice to be here and nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, for that insight. I now have the honor of inviting Dato' Saifuddin to share his thoughts with his keynote message. Dato'.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Thank you, Farouz. Hi, Stephen, and hello, everyone. I'm deeply honored to be a part of this My SDG Action 2030. For a moment, I was thinking that since I have to leave the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then Stephen will forget me. But thank you for still including me, guys. Well,
it's so great to have you.
Thank you. Let me just at this well, you call it keynote, but in my first intervention, just mention or state two major points. With or without COVID-19, and well, pardon me for saying with or without SDG, it is very important that we move to a new framework as to how do we position ourselves between all the major stakeholders. And I'm referring to the state, the business, and the civil society. With SDG 2030, we should actually take that as a very important either beginning or re-beginning to strengthen the framework of cooperation between the three major stakeholders, and that all of us, the state, the business, and the civil society, should act as partners in development together. Put politics aside. I know this is a misnomer now in Malaysia, but it is on a more serious note, I think In fact, this is something that the UN, through various of UN platforms, have been championing, that all stakeholders should be working together. So we have to strengthen that engagement, consultation, deliberation, and making decisions together. Now, my second point is really, and I hope I can share this, especially with my friends from the private sector. I agree with Stephen that we need to have some kind of a paradigm shift. Now, I think we have to move towards a more proactive paradigm when it comes to the private sector playing its role in nation building, and in particular in the context of SDG 2030. What I mean by a more proactive paradigm is, if it is possible for the private sector to take an activist approach towards environment protection, towards charity work, and towards a more people-oriented business. I understand for 1 or 2 decades in the past, one of the important buzzword is CSR, corporate social responsibility and social enterprise. These are 2 very important buzzwords. These 2 buzzwords represent, I believe, an important change in the way business looks at the way we do things. What I'm suggesting, and what I mean by, and what I'm suggesting or proposing to the business sector to take a more activist, to take an activist approach, is not to stop at social enterprise, and not to stop at practicing CSR, but to look at social investment. It is about social investment. I understand the need to make profit, but can we not, for example, try looking at, as I said, not limiting ourselves to the CSR paradigm, the social enterprise paradigm, but dive deeper into looking at our contribution as a social investment. Now, I believe this is the kind of paradigm shift, the kind of approach that is needed, and especially so, number one, because we want to do SDG 2030, and number two, something that we learn from COVID-19. I really hope that we can do this together. Now, as far as the Malaysian government is concerned, I think we are taking steps to help the business sector. We didn't plan for COVID-19, definitely, but on the health component in the fight against or on COVID-19, I think we had rolled out, and we have been following the script, if you like. There was a plan. The Ministry of Health is doing a tremendous job. We also have a good communication plan in trying to explain to people what is happening, what the government is doing, and so on. And then we have to balance between life and livelihood, and that was why since the 4th of May, we had reopened many of the business and economic sector. And the plan I'm referring to is, probably you have heard this from the Minister of Finance, Tengku Zafrul, the 6R. And the 6R refers to resolve, resilience, restart, recovery, revitalize, and reform. And we are now in the recovery stage. And this is why about a week ago, the Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin announced the recovery plan beginning now until November. And why November? Because in November, we will have the budget speech, and that is when we enter into the 5th R to revitalize the economy. And in January, we will launch the 12 Malaysia plan. Now, the 12 Malaysia plan has embedded in it the SDG 2030. And the plan is, of course, to follow through with the 13 Malaysia plan. There was the hiccup because we are supposed to launch RMK or the 12 Malaysia plan in August, but because of COVID-19, we have to postpone it. And frankly, also because of the change in government, we have to tweak some of the policies. So we will launch the 12 Malaysia plan in January, hopefully 2021. And we have our own local interpretation, a holistic interpretation of the SDG, and this is in the form of the shared prosperity vision. The shared I can assure you that for as long as Tan Sri Muhyiddin is the Prime Minister, the shared prosperity vision will carry on. And this is because that vision was authored by the Masa Institute, where Tan Sri Muhyiddin is the chair. So of course, it was launched during the PH administration, Stephen and gang and friends, but because the chairman of Masa Institute is Tan Sri Muhyiddin, so you can be rest assured that the shared prosperity vision is still very much alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato'. Thank you, Dato', for that sharing. If I could pose a quick question to both Dato' and Stephen, do you foresee sustainability being more readily accepted by the Malaysian private sector in the wake of this COVID-19 pandemic? Dato', maybe your thoughts first.
There are two sides of the story. On the one side, because a big part of the business sector is bleeding because of COVID-19. You can't really expect everybody to come on board as quickly as you wish them to do so, and that is only understandable. The second thing is, here is where the government has to play a role. As much as we have to help business to recover, to revitalize itself, we must also put in place specific policy to ensure that sustainability is always on the table. So we really have to understand the situation in the business sector, but the government has to also put in place specific policies. I'll give you an example. And this is an example that comes from my own ministry. So it is a safe example. Internet connectivity. The big question about when are we going to roll out the 5G? So our policy is this. What is premium now is connectivity to ensure whatever that we already have, the platforms, I'm referring to the 3G and the 4G, let's do that to the full. I'm not saying we're going to stop 5G, but we have to be real and we have to be practical. Connectivity first, but at the same time, we prepare for a sustainable rolling out of the 5G among the industry players. And because of that, then you give a room for industry players not to worry so much about the 5G as if you want to do it tomorrow, but let's do our best with whatever funding that we already have now to do what is really needful within these few months.
Thank you, Dato'. Stephen, any thoughts?
I think Dato' has put it very nicely, is that there are these two sides of the story. On the one hand, of course, there are the immediate pressures, to enhance revenue after the crisis. But I do think that in the longer term, for sure, there will be a move, will have to be a move towards sustainability. Because, this is not, the whole sustainability drive is not thought out by policymakers. It's a reaction to a major environmental crisis. And this environmental crisis will lead over short or long to pressures that will basically, I think, recalibrate the market through incentives and through regulatory systems so that the private sector will move. But I don't want to kind of discard here also the leadership of private sector leaders. I think there are so many fantastic private sector leaders already completely internalizing the sustainability aspect into their businesses. And I think after the COVID experiences, these leaders have even more ammunition to kind of move forward more boldly with the recognition that a business is not sustainable in the long run, unless you really kind of go green. The consumer base, I think, will support this. As I mentioned in my remarks, I think the awareness after COVID-19 is bigger than ever before how important environmental considerations are. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. As we are running out of time for part one of this session, I would like to again invite Dato' Saifuddin to share his advice to the private sector and to the viewers on how they can be, sustainability champions. Dato'.
Well, I think all of us are believers in the fact that in many areas, things has to be industry-led and private sector-led. And government's role is really to facilitate and to assist as and when it is necessary. Making the policies, ensuring that the ecosystem is right for business and the private sector to prosper. I'm not in the position to advise Farouz, but I think if again, if I may repeat what I have said at the outset, it's really for us to come together. We have, for instance, in Malaysia, the EAC, the Economic Action Committee, chaired by the Prime Minister. They meet almost every week on Monday morning, and we have a considerable number of people from the private sector represented as permanent members of the Economic Action Committee. I'm sure Elizabeth knows at least one of them very well. And I think this is the way to go. I have attended one or two of the sessions, especially when it comes to digital economy. And we have been receiving a lot of good proposals coming from the industry. So that is really the way to go.
Thank you, Dato'. If I could also invite you to, officially launch our campaign.
We are now towards the end of the show. It has been, to me, an enlightening session. For me, I wish I can stay longer and listen to all of you. I would be at your disposal, Stephen, anytime. I like to be a busybody when it comes to the SDG and many of the things that you do. But for this moment, for today, I have the I have the pleasure of launching the My SDG Action 2030. Thank you very much.
Great.
So with that, we come to the end of our part one of our program. Again, please join me to virtually applaud Dato' Saifuddin and Stefan for their wonderful insights. And now we have the second part, which is our CEO panel, of which I will now hand over the reins to Mr. Jeevan Raju, the country head of Tata Consultancy Services, who will be the moderator for this exciting session. So Jeevan, over to you.
Good morning, Dato'. Thank you, Dato', for being with us in the morning. I think it's very valuable, especially from the government perspective, your insight and how I think private sector would be probably leading the change in this whole SDG. More importantly, I think in this current COVID pandemic, it has opened the eyes of the government as well as the citizens, as well as the private sector, that we all are all in the same boat. It's not about the government problem. It's not about the private sector problem. It's not about my individual. It's our problem. And I think that paradigm shift, knowing that it's our problem and we all need to do something, has, I think, brought a lot of us together. And more importantly, I think this collaboration and dialogue between the private sector and the government, and how we push the needle more for the people that we serve, as especially our shareholders and stakeholders, is going to be the game changer. What is the new world? What is the new norm? Nobody knows the new norm. Nobody knows what's the definition of new norm, because every country in the world is in the same boat. But what we very clearly know is Mother Nature is telling us something very, very strong. Mother Nature is giving us a lot of signal out there, and we need to interpret that and interpret those signals and see how we push the needle more in terms of SDG 2030. So a very good morning to Stefan, distinguished panel of speakers I have here. I have Jalil from PNB, Perbonaran National Berhad. I have Alban from DG. I have Dr. Elizabeth from Sunway Education Group. And I think it's really a privilege for me to be here today and to have this particular session with you, especially in this post-COVID, and Malaysia just sort of have an RMCO right now. So it's a semi-lockdown, not really a fully lockdown. And true enough, immediately after that, we're having this session. And I think it just signifies the importance of what SDG is to the nation, to the citizens, as well as to our shareholders. So I want to, before I start moving on and giving time slots for panel speakers, I just want to give you a bit brief of Tata Consulting Services. Tata Group has been in the social enterprise business for the last 150 years. 67% of our shareholder equity belongs to private philanthropy trusts. That means we work for charity. Every 67% of our dividend goes back into running 2 cancer hospitals, Institute of Science. We do a lot for literacy. We do a lot for underprivileged kids. And the whole philosophy of Tata Group is all about giving back to the community. And the only reason why businesses exist is only because of the community. And that philosophy has been prevalent with us for the last 150 years. And that's probably the test of testimony to say that, test of time, that we have survived for 150 years. And that ethos is very, very prevalent in every business that we do, in every entity that we have, that there is a big thing about what we give back to community. And it's a conversation that we have at board of directors. It's not a conversation done by the CSR or HR. It's a conversation at the board of director level. Why? Because we believe giving back to community is the paramount reason why we exist. And that's the only reason. Profit aside, but the paramount reason why we exist is to give back to the community that we serve. And we've derived so much of value, and now we're looking into big, TCS as an organization is looking into big time circular economy, how we can completely recycle, reuse the waste component from every aspect of it, not just from plastic, but from food wastage, from clothes wastage, all of that, and see how can we circle back this entire wastage into the economy back again. And I was very excited when Feroz told me, hey, can you chair this? And I said, for sure, because this is, for us, in Malaysia, it's very close to our heart. We do a lot of work in the environment space. I think we're probably one of the only IT service provider who's planted close to 3,000 trees in schools And this is initiative we started 4 years ago. And we want to be not just an IT service provider. We want to be a sustainable company. We want to be the most sustainable company, and that's the aspiration that we have. It's not just purely about providing and making money, but we want to really brand ourselves as sustainability. With that, I want to invite Dr. Elizabeth Lee to share a few words about herself, her group. It's a very distinguished group, company, Sunway. I know Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia, who converted into a landmine into something very, very significant. And in fact, it's part of a case study in many Harvard reviews that I've read. So, Doctor, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jeevan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I represent the Sunway Education Group, which is just a group of institutions within a much larger dynamic Sunway group, of which my chairman is Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia. And what he has done is that besides developing the whole Sunway group to what it is today, an international conglomerate, but he has actually put the whole education group into a foundation. And this foundation is known as the Jeffrey Chia Foundation, where we give out a lot of scholarships, and all the fees that we collect will go towards funding research, for example, and giving out scholarships to our students. So it's been amazing to be part of this development. And just as I listened to you, Jeevan, talking about the Tata Group, I mean, the Tata Group is a group that I have always admired, and I'm so glad that, you know, we here in Malaysia also has that opportunity to contribute to our own group, which is the Sunway Group, which owns one of the biggest social enterprises in education, which is the Sunway Education Group.
Thank you, Dr. D. I want to move on to the next speaker. He's claimed to be the youngest CEO for a national fund management. And I like the way what he says, don't judge me for my age, but judge me for what I do. And I think that's a catch line right now, which is buzzing around the town. But I think PNB as an organization in Malaysia has a very pivotal role to play, because they are a primary investor in many of the organizations. And I want to just give the floor to Jalil to share, introduce himself, and then share what PNB does on sustainability.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeevan. As you know, PNB, we manage about 300 billion ringgit of assets, so fairly sizable investment house. But I think the key thing here is that we are always misconstrued as a sovereign wealth fund, which we're not. Right? We are a giant unit trust company, and for a lot of Malaysians, you would know that ASB is quite a household name, and that is our flagship fund. But beyond that, we also own, from a strategic point of view, we control about 13 companies across various industries: infrastructure, banking, plantation, real estate, insurance, oil and gas, automotive. So it's got a significant impact on the larger economy. But I think beyond that, you know, we've been around for about 42 years. We have played a big role in social upliftment as well. We've had a scholarship program for the last 20 years. And now on average, we have about 30 students coming back and serving PNB. But we also have hundreds of other students that we sponsor in various universities. And this is not just for undergraduates, but we even take very poor students out after they have completed their primary school to put them in boarding school. Because for us, what we believe is that giving a child an education, and good education, is probably a means to lift them out of poverty. And then they can then do the same for a lot of others as well. I beyond that as well, you know, we also own significant assets overseas as well, in terms of public markets, private equity, and real estate. And all this and everything that we do flows back to our unit holders by way of dividends that we pay out. So yeah, everyone in the firm and myself especially, we do feel this enormous trust that we have for all the Malaysian public.
Thanks, Jalil. Thanks for the introduction. Last but not least, I want to introduce you to the next gentleman who is a panelist in today's speak. He's, I would say, Alban, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You're probably the longest serving CEO of a telco company in Malaysia right now. And
no, actually, that's not true, Jeevan, but I'll take that compliment, but it's not true.
Okay. So Alban has been with DG for the longest time, I understand, and I think
that's true.
Many initiatives in sustainability. Alban, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jeevan. Hi, Jalil and Elizabeth and Stefan. Thanks, Stefan and Feroz, for the invitation. So we have slightly different approaches. You heard the minister talking a little bit about private sector contribution and what we can do. And like what Jalil mentioned, we do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we are in a business of connectivity. And as you heard the Dato Minister, YBM Dato Minister talk about it, we have the opportunity now to ensure that people are empowered using connectivity to actually improve what they do and how they actually develop their own education programs, lifestyle, and actually improve the quality of living. We have a saying around connecting you to what matters most, and it's really allowing customers to connect to what matters most, be it family, education, health, well-being, just enormous amount of opportunities. So we are the ones that enable that. But the point I think that both Stefan and Minister talked about was quite interesting. You know, how do you make it much more closer to home? How do you make this a valuable part of business? And you know, why is it so important for us to do it? Let me break it down in a couple of things. One is it's just not about corporate responsibility or social responsibility. It's really about when investors and shareholders start to value these investments that companies start to make in developing societies, in empowering societies. That's when this becomes something more resilient. That's when these initiatives become something that we can carry on beyond just something that sits at a corner of a company and just works on improving lives or quality of people. So we bring this into the organization. That's probably the real difference that we do it. We want all employees to own it, and we want also our customers to understand it. So we have something that we call Yellow Heart, which is basically taking out our social initiatives to a retail section. And we openly talk about this in our retail propositions, and so consumers start to know this. And we believe that when you don't separate the two, and when you bring the social involvement or the community angle into and being part of the business, that's when this becomes sustainable, Jeevan. So I'll stop there, and I think we do this for the sake that we believe that employees will differentiate themselves going forward when they know what a company is trying to do. And then for investors and shareholders, they appreciate this even more. So as you know, we are a Malaysian company with shareholders, large shareholders from Telenor, and very much local funds as well. Jalil mentioned different things that they do. And it's we're proud to be part of trying to bring empowerment to Malaysian societies. I'll stop there, Jeevan.
Thanks, Alban. I want to get into the questions that we have today. The first question goes to the panelists. I think we'll start with Doctor. What are the key risk factors and sustainability challenges that your business face in the next couple of years, especially considering the new norm? What do you think, how is that going to change the paradigm of giving education and nurturing the future leaders of the industry? Doctor?
Thank you again, Jeevan. As I mentioned earlier, at the Sunway Education Group, we are not only focused on sustainability of our business enterprise, but we are also committed towards promoting local and global sustainability through education. So if you were to ask me that question, I actually see two major challenges. Challenge number one would be adaptability, as the ambassador also mentioned earlier on, and so did YB Saifuddin. The reality is that even before the pandemic, many universities around the world were already experiencing a decline in enrollment in campus-based programs. And in contrast, a corresponding increase in enrollment of online courses. Now, what the COVID-19 pandemic has done is that it has just converted online learning that was previously a disruptor in the higher education industry to actually a lifesaver of the industry. And we feel very fortunate that at the Sunway Education Group that we have been actually pushing for increased blended learning and the use of online pedagogical tools in the delivery of our teaching and learning. So we have been investing on e-learning platforms and the necessary IT infrastructure to support this over the last few years. So we at least had something to build on and support this over, and to support this now. But certainly, if you were to ask my academics at the start of the year, if they were prepared to run a fully online course, they would have said, they were far from ready. But when it dawned on us that it was no longer a matter of choice, with student safety and academic progression being our main priority, I must say that I am very proud with how my colleagues have responded, both in terms of embracing the online reality, but also volunteering to support other staff who may not have been so online savvy. So having a choice is sometimes a blessing, but certainly having the right people and the institution readiness to adapt are necessary in these unprecedented times. Now, the second challenge, of course, we are a business enterprise, as I've mentioned, is financial sustainability. And I represent the private sector. At Sunway, we are fortunate, again, because we are supported by the Jeffrey Chia Foundation that I mentioned earlier on, and my founder and chairman of the Sunway Group of companies, Tan Sri Dr. Jeffrey Chia. But recent estimates by our Malaysian Association of Private Colleges and Universities has indicated that the COVID crisis will result in as much as 6.9 billion ringgit loss to the industry, with international student arrivals particularly affected. The majority of the higher education institutions, especially private higher education institutions, have been traditionally dependent on tuition fees. So as a result, many higher education institutions are at risk of closing down if the current situation persists. So higher education industry, or rather the higher education institutions, now have to re-strategize our financing mechanisms, streamline, in fact, many areas of business operations, and truly prioritize our strategic initiatives.
Thanks, Doctor. Thanks for the insightful on the education sector. I think it's going to be a pretty challenging year for many education groups. I think we probably need to get back to the drawing board and reinvent yourself in fall. I want to pose the next question to Jalil. Jalil, what do you see as a risk factor and sustainable challenges in your business, given the fact that you are a large investment house, and how do you see that, how the markets are going to react, and do you see where would you put your money at the end of the day? Jalil, to you.
Yeah, so I guess this has always been the key question about whether how much of this should businesses do. Businesses have always seen sustainability as perhaps a cost sometimes, and they've not really kind of embedded it as part of their corporate strategy. And I think this is where I think the thinking is now changing. Let's say that no, this is very important, but but then that also begs the question to what is actually sustainability, right? There's a lot of ways to define it and slice and dice it. For me, sustainability is quite broad range. In the past, it used to be SRI, then ESG, some call it CSR. But I think for me, sustainability is to look at your business and ask yourselves the question, how can I exist for the next 50 years? And what must I do in order to have survival for that long of time? And this could mean few factors, right? This could mean, is the organization built the right way? Is there a steady stream of people coming through? Is there a clear succession plan? Are we investing in the right sort of technology. So it's a lot of things to look at. So I think that is how I perceive sustainability. Now, I think one of the risks is also that as companies embark on this journey, they could be thinking about, let's just take something that has been done elsewhere. Let's just take this sustainability index or whatever, and trying to fit it into their company without really kind of understanding that I think every company has unique requirements. And I think that is perhaps the biggest risk factor, as a lot of people go on this journey and don't quite understand that a lot of things have to be tailor-made. And it's okay for you to go out there and say, this is my sustainability agenda, but it's completely different from everybody else, right? Somebody, if you are in the telco industry, your sustainability agenda will be completely different from one who runs a bank, for example. And for us at PNB as well, we are essentially a fund management company, but beyond that, we also have other companies as well. So we have to look at it a lot more holistically compared to a lot of other organizations.
Thanks, Jalil. Thanks for the insights. I think you've really said it pretty well about sustainability and sustainability index and how is it relevant to your current business that you're operating on. Alban, quick one. Back to what do you see as a key risk factor in the telco space, and also what are the sustainability challenges that you see in this new norm? Do you see that going to be completely shifting the way you do business and the way you serve your consumers?
Yeah, so Jivan, good question. And I think for us, when the new norm caused by COVID or maybe expedited by COVID, let's say, one of the biggest things that you saw was the shift from a lot of physical interaction with our customers to digital interaction with our customers. And just like what Elizabeth said on the education sector, we were able to reach out to our customers very quickly via digital channels. And that's a change. That's a change in habit. Don't forget, Malaysia is not just KL or the key market centers that we talk about. Malaysia is spread. You have all kinds of segments in different parts of the country where we need to serve the different needs. And a lot of them still rely on physical channels to interact, to pay their bills, to buy their top-ups and everything else. So one thing that we decided to do very early was to ensure that customers were able to do this digitally and immediately. I think that's one of the biggest changes that you will see in terms of how Malaysians now have gotten used to transacting much quicker online on wallets and also on just interacting with customer service digitally rather than the old traditional methods. So you'll see one shift there. The other part is the need for connectivity. So the need for connectivity is going to be even more demanding as we have this restart. And when I talk about restart, is you see now, as what Minister mentioned just now, economy is now slowly opening up, sectors are opening up. People need to follow SOPs and the guidance of social distancing and so on and so forth. There's also going to be a need for people to run business very differently, and their connectivity, internet is critical. And affordability is also something that's going to be critical. So how do you serve the various segments, various people, companies who used to have businesses with Southeast Asian or Asia countries like China, India, you can't travel now, borders are closed. So, how do you make sure that people are able to interact, continue the business and still keep Malaysia competitive? So we certainly see ourselves having a role to play. For us, it's been a quick, instant change of mindset, but it also was good because we saw that the investments that we made in the past, both on the network, 3G, 4G that the minister talked about, the focus on reaching out to outside of urban Malaysia has also paid off. But the other real one, Jivan, that has been very good for us has been the digital bets that we took very early in the last couple of years in digitizing our infrastructure, but also our channels. That has really enabled us to serve our customers during this period.
Thanks, Albert. I want to get on to the next question. I want to pose this question to Jalil. Jalil, you see the shift in markets happening because you guys are the fund managers, and you typically where you put your money determines how the particular industry moves about. How do you see your sustainability paying off post-COVID? some of the activities that you've done paying off post-COVID? And how do you see a shift in the economic models that you potentially going to see in countries, in sectors? Because every, like Alban said, every sector is sort of resetting themselves, and nobody knows what is the new norm. How do you see that? How do you see that's going to pan out? And what does it mean from sustainability angle?
Yeah, so I guess, which is why a lot of industries are now grappling with what is the new norm, right? And I think the markets will perhaps treat this quite positively because there is no past indicator of success about how this has been done. But I think, you know, if we take, say, for example, real estate, a company, for example, a lot of the things that they've been thinking is how do we build now in a more sustainable way, you know, not just from an environment point of view, but from a social community, from living. You know, that is already discussions that we are having with our companies as well. And then it's then you know, for us as well, we have been doing things like trying to make our companies come up with that sustainability report framework so that they can also then articulate this back to shareholders. This was sometimes done. It was always done, but probably not well articulated. But I think it's become much more important now that they articulate what they're doing. You know, but from past experience, companies that have adopted this sustainability agenda have definitely seen a much better valuation coming through, because companies are much more, shareholders are much more comforted that the companies are putting in thought about how to do things responsibly and how to run this company over a longer period of time. So yes, there is benefits to doing it, but the key thing is that it needs to be communicated with clarity and into what they're doing. You know, I always say about the why, what, and how. Right? You know, you've got to articulate why you're doing this, what you're doing, and how is this really going to move the needle? How is this going to really impact for your staff, for your company, and for shareholders, or even for the wider community, right? And I think that is something that, from my experience, I look at all this sustainability frameworks being done, it's not properly articulated in that way, because the effect is very different for different stakeholders. For a shareholder, we may be just looking at it from a value creation perspective, you know, eventually longer term. But you know what, the impact for your consumer on the ground is a lot more different compared to other people.
Thanks, Jalil. I want to emphasize to the 1,300 people who is probably listening to this from a investment house. If you have a sustainability strategy, be pretty sure that your market valuation will probably move up, and you probably get better value and better shareholder value. So I think if those out there who have startups and companies keep sustainability as a primary agenda in the way you run your organization, and perhaps the market will respond pretty well. I want to pose the same question to Dr. Elizabeth. In your education field, and how do you see post-COVID? How do you see, with the sombering economic outlook, how is it going to help Sunway Group, and how would the fraternity of educationists in Malaysia or even in the global market respond to this new norm?
You know, Jeevan, I believe that we can all agree that the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the education sector, in fact, around the globe, has been both dramatic and transformative. Why I say dramatic? Because as the World Economic Forum estimates, more than 90% of the world's learners, I'm talking about school children and university students, now their ability to physically go to school, as we all know, have been affected in one way or the other. And this actually accounts for some 1.5 billion students. And then why do I say transformative? Because as painful and as stressful as it has been, the experience has presented an opportunity like never before for all stakeholders in the education industry, be it educators and the education businesses, policy makers and government institutions, learners and their parents, industry and future employers. Well, generally the society at large. We all need to better understand what our vulnerabilities are and value the need to make changes to our current education system. But, you know, having said all that, the reality is that the various economic downturns and crises over the last 3 decades, they've actually helped us to evolve our philosophy and corporate DNA, at least in Sunway Education Group. And the COVID-19 experience has been no different. One, just like many enterprises, we need to communicate and showcase the impact that we create to our stakeholders. Stakeholders in our case, as I've mentioned before, students, parents, government agencies, they need to also appreciate the role that they can play in helping us provide effective solutions for them. And more than ever, despite physical isolation, we also need to be more collaborative rather than competitive, for example. And it is important to be visible and develop symbiotic opportunities. For example, the private universities have been rallying together to ensure that the industry is as resilient as possible during this crisis. We have also leveraged from the solidarity and support demonstrated by our international partners, such as Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, etc. So enhanced strategic communication and collaborative networks have been very crucial to us for our business sustainability. And secondly, just as many enterprises, we have to continuously leverage on our innovativeness and create opportunities that lead to what you call a first mover advantage. And in fact, at Sunway, we are always experimenting with new models of education. Now, not many of you may know this, but we pioneered the twinning program. Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia did that in Malaysia during the Asian financial crisis in the 90s by quickly identifying a very unmet niche. And COVID-19 has accelerated the transformation that I mentioned to online delivery. So we are now looking at new models of online or blended education that can help different groups of learners achieve their needs and ambition. For example, with the MDEC, our Malaysian Development, Malaysia Digital Education Corridor, our iLabs, Sunway iLabs, Innovation Labs, we are collaborating with Ecole42, a French revolutionary tuition-free peer-to-peer based coding platform to produce local digital talents that may drive the gig economy. So the ability to continuously innovate is, I believe, critical for business sustainability.
Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth. I think you carry on your shoulder the burden of nurturing the future leaders of this country, and so that you also provide those kind of right leaders into organizations like TCS and Albern's organization in PNB. So Alban, I want to pose a question to you, Alban. If you perhaps had some sustainability plan in the past, and post-COVID, how did you think that particular plan had helped you to mitigate some of the risks that the current environment has presented to you?
Given very broad question within sustainability and how we went through COVID and come out, but maybe let me break this out a couple of things. I think sustainability, as Jalil and I talked about earlier, goes beyond just the corporate social responsibility frame, right? It's way beyond. It talks about the country, it talks about the connectivity. As you know, all the operators supported the nation during the MCO period with some data reaching out to the customers and so on and so forth. Within, I think leaders, and I'm not just talking about DG in general, but I think just leaders in general and companies, we have a huge opportunity during such situations like a pandemic to think about how do we align to some of our SDG goals. So, for example, DG is linked to SDG 10, reduce inequalities. But if you just look within the company, our role as an employer to employees to safeguard the employees during this period of time? That's for me a sustainability question as well. How do you ensure that we don't have to reduce workforce, protecting employees and their families so that they can continue to do what they need to do? That's a responsibility of corporate Malaysia, given this time, given the challenges, prioritizing. How do you find new pockets of efficiency so that you can take those efficiencies and then protect the things that matter most to organizations, which is its people? How do you make sure supply chains also get paid on time, get to do their jobs, get to control their workforce? So for us, we have actually run business remotely for the last 90 days with a team, very core team of people that have put themselves in front of the rest of us in the company, managing front lines, managing customer service, managing technology and marketing areas, which are critical to the business. And that has actually helped sustain that whole supply chain of vendors, partners, providers, suppliers, logistics companies, everything else below us, right? And that's something that I think during situations like COVID-19, corporations, leaders must be aware that you can't do this ourselves. Firstly, it is through collaboration with people like Sunway, with companies that PNB owns and others. But first of all, you also need to park competition slightly aside and just go through prioritization and say, you know, which are the priorities that we want to look after? Employees, stakeholders, supply chains, communities, segments which need you to provide extra coverage. So for example, during this pandemic, we were asked to do extra coverage in hospitals, in care centers. You know, so you need to step up all those things. At the same time, don't forget that we need to run business. And so the integrating of and responsibility of sustainability as part and parcel of your core business, super important.
Excellent, Alban. Thanks for the insights. Jalil, I want to ask you a question. In post-COVID, or rather during COVID period, I presume there was a lot of reorganization or organization jig that you had to do to ensure that, because the markets were reacting quite aggressively. And obviously in the roundtable meetings, the war rooms that you typically would want to set up in your office would probably perhaps not there. How did you organize, how did you rechange your organization to approach this post-COVID pandemic? And how would you think that, would that model be sustainable moving forward for your organization?
Yeah, so I think it was less of an issue dealing with the markets because, you know, this is what we do on a daily basis. So we do deal with market volatility pretty frequently. So that was least of our concerns. What was the biggest issue was how to mobilize the organization. So before MCO kicked in, we activated BCP earlier and we made this very decisive call early on that about 2-3 weeks before MCO that we would mobilize half of our workforce to work from home. And this, why I say this was quite a decisive decision, was that this is a very traditional organization which has never been used to working from home. But we felt that it was one of the things that we needed to do fairly quickly. And then we moved that up to about 90% and close to 100% just before MCO kicked in. But that was the big structural shift that we needed to do. We did that first. And we said, let's solve all the issues that may arise later. Because if we wait for the yes answer for every single issue that we have, we're never going to do it. And so that was one thing that we really had to reshape. And then post-COVID as well, we needed to relook some of our policies and strategies, right? You know, whether this makes sense. And, you know, those were always in the plan, but I would say that the pandemic kind of accelerated quite a lot of things, especially on the digitalization front. We now, initiatives that we said that we would want to do perhaps a year down the line, we've now brought it forward now. Because as we start getting used to this new norm of working from home and doing all this, we also realized that, you know, there were a lot of gaps and shortcomings. So we have reprioritized in terms of our priorities, what projects we should be doing, what tools we should be using. So that has now been completely changed compared to perhaps perhaps 3 months ago. Now, I guess back to my earlier point, when we do all this, the clarity of messaging needs to be absolutely clear about, why we're doing this, what we're doing, and how is this going to affect you. So I've spent a lot of time with the staff to kind of explain in detail about how is this going to look like for you, how is this going to affect you, and that we need to do this so that it's sustainable. But it's been a good exercise for us, and it's even with also now found out a lot of things which I'm sure with the fact that we're doing this on a online virtual forum, that a lot of things can be done fairly efficiently. Time management is better. But I also said that this was a time that leaders need to show compassionate leadership, where we need to take into account how staff feels like and everything. So we've now made work from home a permanent feature, and we've told all the staff that those with kids, you can stay at home until such time schools reopen. So we're being flexible, but it's also a learning experience for everyone. So this has been a huge change for the organization.
Thanks, Jalil. This is where I always say you should always have a financial or a capital market guy as your close friend, because they're able to predict a lot of these things even before it happens. So obviously in Jalil's organization, he saw this coming before the lockdown, and he sort of implemented BCP even before it really happened. It's a good one, Jalil. I'll keep that in mind. Dr. Lee, I want to shift this question to more on the climate crisis that we're currently having. I think we all know the climate is in a crisis mode. I think we all agree about that. There's no doubt about that. But how would an educational group be playing an impetus role in the green economy? The fact that the green economy could be the new economy post-COVID. Nobody knows what that means in a green economy sense, but how can an education group play a significant role in curating and creating the next batch of leaders that come out into the world, into the workforce? Guys like us are perhaps old haggies, and we're probably going to retire soon. So, but the new set of leaders who are going to come...
Not Jalil. Not Jalil.
Not Jalil. Jalil is pretty young, yeah.
Jalil is a long time now.
And who can create this whole new brand of green economy. What is Sunway Group, or what is the educational fraternity doing about green economy and creating those new leaders?
Well, thank you, Jeevan. I certainly hope so, that we can learn from this current crisis and take the opportunity, to invest and grow a green economy. In fact, we're actually doing that. Let me tell you a little bit more. Now, the Sunway Group, you asked me about the Sunway Group first. It has been investing in green economy for decades now. Sunway City, in fact, is Malaysia's first integrated green township to be certified by the Green Building Index. And Sunway University now is the home to education and research centers that are dedicated towards supporting the sustainability agenda. For example, you may have heard of our flagship, the Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development. This supports, obviously, the various efforts to realize the 17 UN SDGs. We have also invested heavily on sustainability research, such as the Center for Carbon Dioxide Capture and Utilization. Stefan talked about carbon capture earlier on, so I was very glad about that. This is something that we have been researching on, and in fact is now working on this with MIT, no less. And we have also carried out countless events and initiatives to create awareness on sustainable development goals, such as we have something known as the Last Straw campaign, which was really to eradicate single-use plastic. And we even had a rock concert dubbed Rock the Goals, when you work with young people, and have them shine a light on sustainability. Sunway University, as the Asian hub of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, also known as the UNSDN, will also be rolling out various education policies and research initiatives in collaboration with Harvard to advance the sustainability agenda in the continent. And recently, our Sunway Innovation Labs, we launched Sunway Future X. And this is something that I'm extremely excited about. It is an urban farming innovation hub that will promote research, training, and actual indoor and outdoor smart farming facility. So farm to table, farm to your dining table. All this is going to happen here at Sunway as well. And this is designed to tackle the major threat of food security, obviously. So as knowledge generators and disseminators, it is incumbent that we drive the changes needed in this new normal. We do not only educate our students about sustainability, but sustainability must be seen through the daily activities on our campus. So our students do not only learn about being sustainable from their lecture notes, but they also get to apply theory through sustainable practices around the campus. Jeevan, it's interesting because actually now more than ever, with the onset of COVID-19 on top of the climate change crisis, and there are more pillars, goals to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I'd like to, in fact, even talk about the glaring inequalities of all kinds that exist across the world. We really need to develop future leaders and societies that harbor a different mindset. Stefan talked about paradigm shift and value system, which would correct the unsustainable path that we have been talking about. So maybe if I can extend what you mean by green, to all the other inequalities as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Alban, how do you see green economy in this current climate crisis? How would the telco fraternity play a pivotal role in this green economy moving forward? Could you share your thoughts?
Sure, Jeevan. I'm going to go broad again a little bit. Let me start with the first question that you had, or the main one that you posed, which is how can telcos sort of support an ambition on ensuring the environment becomes more green? Of course, easy solution around there is equipment. We used a lot of equipment, servers, mainframes, towers, all those things. There's already steps that we are doing, but also you will see this being done in a lot of countries globally, where equipment is being much more climate friendly. The way you treat, the way you utilize power of these equipments. There are further technologies coming out in terms of greener technologies, even for communication, towers, cables, servers, so on and so forth. So I think you will have one block of opportunity or improvements in that space. So carbon emission from all these equipments will be reduced. And you can see that happen in the last couple of years, and you can see that being accelerated even further in the next couple of years. So we, for example, modernize our network from time to time. We are in a modernization every couple of years where we look at all the equipment, power utilization, and then wastage of that. How do you actually, refurbish, reuse? How do you recycle some of these materials? So we have an obligation to do that well. The second part is, don't forget, we are all large employers of Malaysian talent. So how do you educate Malaysians, be it whether they're Digi or any of these corporates, of the CEOs that are here and any other corporates? How do you build a culture of ownership in Malaysia on ensuring that we look after our environment? We do small steps in the office. We look at utilization. We change the way we eat our food, what we eat it in, how we pack our food. Digital economy has taken off. Everybody's celebrating digital economy and shopping, e-shopping and everything else. But look at the amount of packages and wastage of that's happening. Food being delivered in Tupperwares, containers. How do you change that mindset of Malaysians and globally as well? The third part is using technology. How can we use technology of the future to help governments monitor and make good decisions in terms of taking action? So 5G technology, for example, will come, and how do you actually make sure that we use 5G technology to protect the environment? You have a lot of talents coming out of places like Sunway and everywhere else. How to use these talents, match them with technology, and do good for the country. But the last one, Jeevan, that I want to mention is brands. You really have to believe that your brand has more than just a price or a package or a promotion. If your brand has sustainability, like what I started off talking about, we have Yellow Heart, link it to an SDG, or what Jalil said, consumers will pick brands that place an emphasis on doing good in society, diversity, sustainability, all those things. And consumers are the ones that will actually force brands to make that pivot or that change in direction. So the ones that have started this early, whether it's climate, improvements on the climate, improvements on sustainability or diversity, those are the ones that actually will much more believe in consumers going forward.
Great. We're coming to a close, and I think there are a couple of, there's a whole lot of questions coming out, but I want to shift this to a bit more an affirmative action. I think we started this conversation in saying this climate change and sustainability, it's not a government problem, it's not a private sector problem, it's not one group, it's our problem. And given the fact that it's our problem, would you as leaders of your own respective organization make an organizational pledge in terms of come out very strong about this pledge, articulate it in your comms about what you want to do from climate change, whether reduce emission or provide more jobs for the less privileged, some affirmation action would your organization do? And what would it be? It's my question. Jalil?
Yeah, so it's something that we already do in bits and pieces. But again, I said that I think the key is clarity in the communication. So we do a lot of work to help bridge the inequality that exists purely by way of education. We try to help the healthcare system. Even before this pandemic happened, we have been buying healthcare equipment for government hospitals. So we have been doing all those initiatives, but it's more of to communicate that better. The other one would be on when it comes to things like climate change and all that sort of things. This pandemic has kind of been an opportunity for us to kind of really be able to now start measuring. So one thing I've told the team internally to do is start measuring our carbon emission, because we're not traveling much now. So it's coming off a zero base. And we would like to see now what sort of meetings can we do efficiently now, virtually versus a face-to-face meeting where we need to travel. So we are going to start measuring all this. And we will come out and put this as part of our sustainability framework, which we're working on. Which goes back to my earlier point that I said that I think every organization needs to look at sustainability agenda uniquely for themselves. And I think that's what we are doing. We're looking at what we do across healthcare, education, internally as well. How can we be greener, and a whole load of other things. In fact, we're looking even at when it comes to financing, to issue more for a green bond. We did that in the financing of our new building, where it was a completely green bond. But that is something that we're also looking at. So there's a whole load of things that could be done, and we're putting all this as part of a sustainability framework, which we will then make public as a document.
Thanks, Jalil. Dr. Lee, your thoughts on this matter, simply because I think everybody talks about it. There's a lot of what people say greenwashing of sustainability. How does the Sunway Group or the education fraternity see this, and moving forward, how would you rejig your organization?
Well, as the largest education-focused social enterprise in Malaysia, the core essence of our approach has always been to serve humanity through education and utilizing the diverse resources that we have in the Sunway Group for the benefit of good. We have, this hashtag Sunway for Good, for example. And in crises like the COVID-19, our organization comes together to benefit the community in a sustainable manner. For example, during the devastating Nepal earthquake in 2015, we actually worked together with Mercy Malaysia, and we committed to provide scholarships, and they were at that point worth 1 million ringgit to 5 deserving students from Nepal. The idea then was, instead of giving water, everyone was giving water. I felt very strongly that, you know, as an education enterprise, we needed to help them for the future. You know, it's not just about the immediate. There are lots of people looking into immediate needs, but to think about the future. And so we picked up 5 deserving students who have lost their homes and had the potential to make change. And so had them come over here, be with us for, I think they were with us for 4 years. And then, in fact, now returning home upon graduation. And it is to make that difference to the community, contribute back to the rebuilding of their nation. So during this COVID-19 crisis, we also set up, you know, a small COVID-19 student support fund, where we were able to help our local and international students who were unfortunately stranded, and they faced financial difficulties and, in fact, scarcity of essential goods. You know, when MCO hit, you know, people were caught without food, health supplies, money was not coming in from overseas. So it was quite a nightmare. But while we continue to evolve to ensure that our own business sustainability and care for our main stakeholders, the rest of our students, we realize that we also need to expand the reach of our own social impact. For example, we recently recognized, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, many small and medium enterprises which may have so much potential, but they just did not have the training or experience to capitalize on how their business behaviors are being reshaped, and how human socialization and, in fact, consumer activities are shifting dramatically to the online platforms that you know, was just mentioned by Alban. So through our Sunway iLabs and the Alibaba Global E-commerce Talent Program, we launched and just completed the e-commerce jumpstart program, and this has assisted some 1,600 SMEs to understand, survive, and capitalize on the current changes and opportunities by establishing an online presence. And this initiative actually received tremendous support from our many partners, which include the MDEC and Magic. So what I'm trying to say is that, how do you stay relevant while you are still grappling with your own financial sustainability? But at the same time, I think we really need to see how we can help others as well, because it's not just about us. If the whole community doesn't get well, you know, we will be equally sick. You know, it's just like COVID. We're just going to be infected as well. So the more we help others, the more we will help ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. I think we've run out of time. There's a whole stack of questions. If I answer all these questions, there'll be another hour for the panelists to respond back. And I think it only means, when there's a lot of questions, it only means that you guys have done a good job. So if there were no questions, I'd be pretty worried about it. But I want to end with a few things right now. I think there are 3 Ds about sustainability, which I want to really call out. What are the 3 Ds? Sustainability needs determination. Every organization needs to be determined to do something with that. And from that determination, we need to bring the culture of devotion. I'm devoted to sustainability. And then eventually, when you're devoted to sustainability, then you feel you're duty bound. I'm duty bound as like Alban is a CEO. I'm duty bound to my employees. Jalil is CEO. I'm a duty bound. And also elsewhere. So how do we be duty bound to sustainability? So these are 3 Ds on sustainability that I hope the speakers out there, with 1,000 old people, can take back. How do you determine? How do you be determined? How do you be devoted? And how do you be duty bound to sustainability? Number 1. And lastly, I think it is something which it's a new paradigm for all of us. All of us, and like I said, is in the same boat. And it's not it's not the government problem. It's not the private sector problem. It's our problem. What I urge all of you, over 300 people on this panel who's listening today, make a pledge as a family. What is my family pledge on sustainability? Put it up in your fridge. Discuss it with your families. Get your kids involved. Get your family involved, your spouse involved, and put a pledge. What this family stands for, sustainability. And write it big and get the kids to really own up to that and put it in the fridge. So every day you open the fridge, you're going to see this family stands for something in sustainability, whether it's planting more trees, whether completely not using single-use plastic, something your family must stand out for. And that once your family stands out for that, your relatives will suddenly say, hey, Albin's family, Jalil's family, and Elizabeth's family are all very different. They're very strong on sustainability. And then it sort of trickles to the community. And when it trickles to the community, then the nation has a chance to make that paradigm shift that the minister spoke about today. And with that, I want to thank you all. My immense gratitude to all of you, Jalil, Dr. Lee, Albin, for sharing your thoughts and your time and insights. I think if we were to put dollars and cents without talking like an investment banker right now, if you put dollars and cents behind all your time, you'll probably run into millions. So I don't think we can afford that. So Jalil, thank you again, once again. And I'm going to pass it back to Feroz for the closing remark. And once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jeevan.
Thank you, Jeevan, for that wonderful ending to this very insightful CEO panel. So with that, we've come to the end of our session. Please, again, join me for virtually applauding our fantastic panelists for today. Dr. Elizabeth Lee, the CEO of Sunway Education Group. We have Jalil Rashid, the CEO of PNB. We have Albin Murty, the CEO of DG Telecommunications, and also Jeevan Raju, a fantastic moderator who is the head of TCS here in Malaysia. So again, to all the viewers and to everyone, please let us work together and collectively let's raise our ambition to achieve the SDGs in this decade of action. So thank you all very much. A good day ahead. Stay safe and to a sustainable future to all. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much to all of the panelists and to all of the attendees. I am here to say on behalf of Inside Pack that this event is officially over, so I shall proceed to stop the live stream and to stop the recording. So as we speak, live stream has been stopped, and so has been the recording. So thank you very much. I shall proceed to end the conversation. I wish you all a good day over there and
Thanks.
fantastic evening. If that is the case, thank you. It was a most compelling
Thank you,
event,
Ricardo.
so
Thank you, Ricardo, for
best.
really organizing this pretty well. Albin, Jalil, Dr. Lee, really appreciate your time. Feroz, you've been the glue to piece it all